By allowing people to be empowered within their lanes, you create efficiency, but also innovation. What tools do I use? That is a great question. So I think that the more we make decisions, the easier it gets. The more we do anything, the easier it gets. And I remember being really struck by something Brené Brown said in one of her many brilliant books, where she said that gut instinct is actually just your subconscious brain rapidly scanning through a library of relevant experiences and pulling out something that will give you the answer. So really what that means is instinct isn't something that you sort of just feel. I mean, it is, but the reason you feel it is because it's based on experience. In other words, it's still based on evidence. So I think you have to create the evidence, which means you go out there and you make decisions, and then you learn from them and you work out how you might have done it differently next time. But ultimately, I think the confidence to make decisions under pressure comes from having made decisions in the past, and just sort of relying on, knowing that you can rely on your presence of mind in that moment. And it all just comes from experience, I think. So obviously, when you start out, that's a daunting prospect. But all I can say is it gets easier the more you do it. So I definitely used to think that there were some people that were just tougher than others, and I definitely thought I was one of the tougher ones. And I think when you get to my age, or, I'm not saying you have to wait until this point, but generally life doesn't run smooth, and at some point something will happen that will make you wake up and realize that everybody's breakable. And that, I don't say that with any pride. So I think what I learned is that resilience isn't a mark of your character. It's down to the resources that you have to deal with whatever life throws at you. But also it's down to the training as well. I really do think we can train ourselves to be more resilient. And that's something I learned in the military. Part of it is just by leaning into discomfort. In the military, we spend a lot of time being uncomfortable. Usually that means being cold, wet and hungry. But it teaches you that being uncomfortable won't kill you. And that's an amazing confidence to have when you go through any kind of adversity. And I think it really helps you to feel resilient. But we had that because we'd been through these experiences, and you'll be probably picking up on a trend here. A lot of this just comes from kind of doing the training and the experience. So yeah, I think the biggest myth about resilience is that it's something you have or you don't. I think it's absolutely all to play for. I think you can train yourself to be more resilient. And I also think that the resources that you have will make a big difference in how you deal with what life throws at you. So I think there is a lot of discussion at the moment about sort of working in silos, and often organizations are quite hard on themselves for working in silos. But one of the things I learned in the military is that there is a time and a place for this. And, one of the stories I tell is actually about being involved in a special forces mission. And to begin with, there was some reluctance to let a woman fly, not through any kind of sexism, but they just thought that the special forces would be very protective of me if we got in any trouble, and that would distract them from their mission. In fact, they revealed that they didn't really care who was driving the helicopter, and they were there to do a job, and they wanted me to be there to do mine. And that reinforced a really important point, is that actually there's a time and a place for being in your lane and doing what you're good at. And that means giving people the autonomy to do what they're good at without being micromanaged, but also to solve their own problems. Actually, we're more self-sufficient than we realize. And I think often we feel like it's a failure in culture and leadership if we're not there to rescue people immediately. But if we can step back and let people do a bit of their own problem solving, then they create more autonomy. And that means you can get on with doing what you're good at. So that's more efficient. But also, when people have the ability to problem solve for themselves, they have to think for themselves. And people are wonderful, and they might come up with something that you wouldn't have thought of. So actually, you're increasing the cognitive diversity and the innovation. So I think it's a win-win, really, by allowing people to be empowered within their lanes, you create efficiency, but also innovation. Yeah, so I think, I mean, in the military, we survived on a sort of diet of banter. And I think if anyone said anything that was outdated, you would just banter them. So you would kind of use humor, I suppose. And I think that's quite a good way of, I remember someone I really respect saying, humor is like oven gloves to hold hot stuff. So I think it's a good way of dealing with quite a serious issue, but actually not kind of giving it more energy than is helpful. So I think that's one thing. I think, having a sort of healthy dose of humor is a good way to deal with things. And I think the other thing is obviously modeling the behaviors that you want to see. And also when other people step up and model those behaviors, championing them. So I remember, again, I mentioned before about sometimes us mothers think it's all down to us and we sort of feel a bit martyrish. But I remember there was a guy that I worked with in the RAF, and he used to put in his diary childcare. And I remember a couple of people mocked him, and I was about to jump on the bandwagon and kind of go, oh, well, why should he be allowed to? And then I thought, no, absolutely right, that he, is showing the way for the other dads. And then going, no, it's absolutely right. We're all parents at the end of the day. We have parents. We are parents. Why wouldn't you? So actually, I think it's also checking yourself and making sure that you're supporting the people that are also helping to outdate those workplace norms. So learning from failure is something that I talk about a lot. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is I come from a military aviation culture where we really did champion this, and we have the luxury of being quite mature in our journey. So I feel like that's something that I need to share with the rest of the world because I've got the benefits of that. And I also do genuinely believe that failure brings opportunity, because we often don't really plan for it. We have an unexpected outcome, which can open a door that we didn't even know was there. So I am really passionate about kind of turning defeat into victory and leveraging failure. But it's a really good point that we need to balance it. And I probably am, I do focus a lot of time on the failure side of things. And I think that it's a balance between kind of growth mindset and personal acceptance. Often I reach for mindfulness and self-compassion when I think about how to balance this, because I always want to be better and I always want to learn to be better. But also, I also know that every day I'm turning up and being the best version I can be, and that's good enough today. So I do think it has to be a balance. And for me, I think I've understood that my weak spot is probably the learning from success. So I have to carve out time and be quite intentional about it, because the learning from failure, that's actually quite a natural thing for me to do now. So I think it's understanding yourself and knowing which one you'll veer towards, and then creating the space quite intentionally for you to do a bit of both.